From this division, two separate nations emerged. Those who followed Nephi had God's favor and were called Nephites. 2 Nephi 5:21 describes the Nephites as being white and exceedingly fair and delightsome. The Book of Mormon teaches that the Nephites were a sophisticated people who grew into a large civilization. Helaman 3:8 describes how the Nephites populated the American continents when it says they began to cover the face of the whole earth, from sea south to the sea north, from the sea west to the sea east. Mormon 1:7 says of the growing Nephites, the whole face of the land had become covered with buildings, and the people were as numerous almost as it were the sands of the sea. The other nation grew from the people who followed Nephi's rebellious older brother Laman. They were now called Lamanites. 2 Nephi 5, verses 21 and 24 says of the rebellious Lamanites that the Lord did cause a skin of blackness to come upon them, and because of their cursing which was upon them, they did become an idle people, full of mischief. The Book of Mormon at times describes the Lamanites as being even more numerous than Nephites, but far more primitive. 3 Nephi chapter 11 describes the Book of Mormon's crowning event when Jesus Christ appears in the sky when he visited the Americas around 33 A.D. Jesus brought 200 years of peace between the Nephites and Lamanites. Then war broke out again as the Lamanites grew in strength and began to annihilate the Nephite race. By the year 326 A.D., the general of the Nephite army was a man named Mormon. In Mormon 6:2 he writes, "And I, Mormon, wrote an epistle unto the kings of the Lamanites, that we might gather together our people unto the hill, which was called Cumorah, and there we could give them battle." In this final battle on the hill Cumorah, the Lamanites completely destroyed all of the Nephites. As recorded in Mormon chapter 6, when the Nephite casualties from the battle on the hill Cumorah are added up, they number 230,000. Mormon's son Moroni was the only Nephite to escape alive. This is the same Moroni who appeared to Joseph Smith as the messenger from heaven more than 1,400 years later. Moroni hid the golden plates, but before doing so he added his own written accounts to them. In Mormon chapter 8, verses 2 through 9, Moroni writes that after the great and tremendous battle at Cumorah, behold, the Nephites who had escaped into the country southward were hunted by the Lamanites until they were all destroyed. And my father also was killed by them, and I even remain alone to write the sad tale of the destruction of my people. Therefore, the Book of Mormon ends with the Lamanites being the sole surviving race of people living in the Americas. This is why the title page in the Book of Mormon declares that it is specifically written to the Lamanites, who are a remnant of the house of Israel, and also why the introduction page in the Book of Mormon concludes that, after thousands of years, all were destroyed except the Lamanites, and they are the principal ancestors of the American Indians.
Well, it was during my second year as a bishop that I stumbled upon DNA research on Native Americans. The basis of the belief that Lamanites were the ancestors or the principal ancestors of Native Americans is doctrine. It's church doctrine. It's taught in the scriptures.
The traditional view that I grew up with of the Book of Mormon is that it was a story of the people, and I think it's fair to say all the people, of the American continent.
The crux of the issue is what's been taught over 170 or so odd years of Mormonism. And that, what has been taught, and it's very clear if we go back and look at the records of what's been taught, is that the Book of Mormon is a literal, factual history of the people that were on this continent and their visitation by Christ and so forth.
There's no evidence in the current leadership of the church that this belief is changing. Even a couple of years ago we had the first presidency dedicating temples in South and Central America and informing the local Native Americans that they're descended from Lehi.
Recently, new inroads in the research on human DNA has allowed scientists to determine the relatedness of different populations around the world. Children inherit a mixture of their parents' DNA, which is a mixture of their grandparents' DNA, and so forth. With each subsequent generation, that DNA becomes increasingly mixed and blended with DNA from other ancestors. However, smaller, isolated amounts of DNA exist in the cells of both fathers and mothers that do not mix when passed to their children. The father's Y chromosome DNA remains intact as it is passed down to his son, and to his son's son, and so on through multiple generations. In the same way, the mother's mitochondrial DNA also remains intact as it is passed down to both her sons and daughters, from one generation to the next. Scientists are then able to trace these intact DNA markers back through hundreds of generations to determine ancestry. When the Y chromosomes or mitochondrial DNA are tested in hundreds or even thousands of individuals from two different populations of people, the results can be compared to see how similar or dissimilar these intact DNA markers are between people groups. Dr. David Glenn Smith has spent more than 30 years studying Native American genes. He has dozens of publications to his name. His lab at the University of California, Davis, is one of the country's leading test labs of Native American DNA.
If you look at genes in Native Americans, they came from their ancestors. They had to come from their ancestral populations, and those ancestors lived somewhere. You can look for those genes in Jewish populations, but you don't find them. If you look at genes that are most commonly found in Native American populations and those that are most commonly found in Jewish populations, they don't coincide at all.
Recently, I've been involved in a number of research projects that have examined DNA variation in ancient populations in the Americas. I don't know of any data that suggest particular similarity of Native American populations to any population of the Middle East.
Archaeologists and physical anthropologists have not found any evidence of Hebrew origins for the people of North, South, and Central America.
Currently, on the available evidence, there is nothing to suggest any relationship whatsoever with Israelites.
The overwhelming evidence negates the Book of Mormon claim that the American Indian represents a genealogical descendant from Israel.
Thomas Murphy is a Mormon scholar and the chair of the anthropology department at Edmonds Community College in Lynnwood, Washington. He is working on his doctorate at the University of Washington on the DNA issue that faces his religion.
We are in a dilemma now. The genetic evidence shows clearly that American Indians are not Hebrews. They are not Israelites.
Some Mormon apologists have...
Welcome back to Truth Seekers. That's a big problem for Mormonism. We inherit certain genes from our ancestors, passed down, as they said, male to male. And I come from a Jewish background. I no doubt will have that marker that they talk about there that Jews have. But they don't have it found among American Indians at all. They have those markers that are found in Asia. And so we've got that one line, so you folks can give us a call if you'd like and talk about this or any other area of spiritual truth-seeking. Jay, do you want to comment on that at all?
Well, you know, it's speaking of evidence, Mike, you can look at the Native American Indian, and you can look at the Eskimos, and you can look at the Eastern Asians, the Siberians, the Mongolians, and you can see the makeup, the facial structure makeup alone, they kind of look alike. Mm-hmm. So that makes sense. And what these scientists are saying is they're taking those DNAs out of each one of those tribes or in nations, and there's a connection there. They have that Y chromosome connection and that mitochondrial from the mother side connection.
Mitochondrial. Yeah.
Mitochondrial. So evidentially, Mike, we have evidence showing where the Native Americans come from, where the Hebrew nation comes from. You and your Jewish ancestors over there in Israel, you have a DNA connection there. But yet the Native Americans do not have any connection with the Israelites, as these scientists are saying. So that, to me, shakes the very foundation of the Book of Mormon.